Welcome back to another episode of the Rise and Grind podcast. Today, it is my privilege to interview my friend and my accountant, Hayden Beck. Hayden is a principal owner in EBT Chartered Accountants here in town. EBT's been a staple in the Medicine Hat community for decades, very long time. I was surprised to hear Hayden mention that they have about 130 to 150 staff members or in the EBT world, which is amazing. Their building downtown Medicine Hat is one of the coolest buildings in town, in my opinion. If you haven't been in there, definitely pop your head in there. The architecture is gorgeous, big brick building on the corner downtown 3rd Street. And I really enjoyed my conversation with Hayden today for many reasons. But number one being just, I'm always curious when I come across people that legitimately love what they do and their passion aligns with their day-to-day job. I think that's very rare to come across. People may say they love what they do, but you only know it, and it's an intangible thing where you run into people or you meet people who are like, holy smokes, they wake up every day wanting to get better professionally, personally, and they legitimately enjoy whatever position or role they're in. And I think anyone like that, I'm always curious in having a conversation with, because hopefully I can pluck a nugget of gold for me to implement as well. But we got into an array of topics today, from EBT's origin story to what it looks like getting a job at EBT, whether it be a summer student all the way up to being a partner. And I think it's really cool what EBT has built culturally, how there's a lot of room for professional development. And I'm always curious in big businesses like that, how they cultivate that culture and how they keep retention high. Because I know that's a challenge for a lot of businesses. And I want to share this story. And remember, this was a couple of years back. Hayden and his dad, Todd, were walking me through the EBT building. And we walked into this one office space. It was on the main floor. It's kind of where I would say more their green or junior associates were working. It was this big room with a bunch of cubicles. And we walk in there and it's dead silent. And all you can hear is just a bunch of keyboard clicking. That's all you can hear. And I've never been so frightened in my life because that world is so foreign to me. And that's why accountants, especially Hayden, why they're so valuable to small business owners like myself, because that is such a world that I think is very important. Accountants are very important to have on your team if you're a small business, because they take care of all your crap, all your stuff. They're there for guidance. And Hayden is there for me all the time, which I really appreciate. Also appreciated his time today, sitting down with me and answering all my questions. So without further ado, Hayden Beck, hope you enjoy and hope you learn something. We'll see you. Rise and grind. All right, we are live with my friend, my accountant, Hayden Beck. He is the one of the principal owners in EBT Chartered Accountants here in town. Hayden, how are you, man? Bring me up to speed with how this winter's been for you.
Well, as they say in Game of Thrones, winter is coming. It has not quite arrived, at least for people in my line of work. This is sort of the calm before the storm. So the end of summer, fall, everyone's kind of getting ready for the end of the year. But most of my work is actually after year end. So it's mostly a lot of catch up, reorg, and tax projects. Making sure kind of everything I can get caught up on is caught up on ahead of the big demand season.
Man, I have so many questions about like the accounting world in general. And one of them is the nature of your business. You guys get so busy, like you said, kind of in the new year. Can you and I'd imagine a lot of the listeners are kind of around my acumen for understanding the accounting world. Can you give some detail as to why everything comes in waves? Is it just because so many people have a year end that follow the calendar?
The majority of corporate clients have a December year end. Kind of try and aim to not have that as much as you can. It's not necessarily conducive for lots of tax planning reasons, but nonetheless, it is the default in a lot of cases. And so there just is a lot of corporate work that relates to December 31st year ends. And at the same time, that's when everyone's personal tax is. So you kind of are automatically stacking for one of them, 3 or 4 months of the year, you're stacking two totally different streams, if that makes sense. And the people
Yeah.
who are usually concerned about their personal tax aren't concerned about a corporate file per se, and vice versa. So there's not always overlap, and a lot of mouths to feed, for those few months. So it's very doable, but it takes um, having as much kind of proactive work put in as you can, and being in a good spot to then respond to emergencies as they come up, or questions, and
Hmm.
kind of give the best service throughout that period as you can.
Gotcha. I want to get into kind of the origin story of EBT as a business, kind of how it came to be. I was doing some light reading last night. You guys are over 100 employees total now. Is that right?
Yeah, closer to 150 to be honest. We've been
Wow.
over 100 for a long time. There is some seasonality involved, so usually we'll kind of peak in tax season in March and April, and then be a little bit lower in the summertime, as we usually have some students who go on leave to write their accounting exams and things like that. But in my head, I think of like between 130 and 150 production staff, meaning
Wow.
meaning everything from students to full CPAs to administrative staff and so on.
Gotcha. So, correct me if I'm wrong here. When you came into EBT, your dad was obviously involved there. Can you tell me like how EBT came to be, and maybe
Mhm.
why EBT, why Downtown Medicine Hat? Like, just give me the origin story, or at least bring me up to speed with how it grew so much so quickly. Really.
Sure. So it is a little bit of one of those on the shoulders of giants situations. It was started technically over 50 years ago, by some different accountants who have been involved for several decades, but basically they started a firm with a different name. That firm was purchased about 30 years ago by three individuals, one of which was my father, Todd Beck, and Dan Thompson and Curtis Ensminger were his two partners at that time. So three principals essentially, and a fairly modest amount of staff, and they purchased the existing, call it business. From there, over the past 30 years, they took it from three principals and maybe 20 staff at most, to where it is today, where we've now got 15 principals and the support staff that we just discussed. And that is an uncommon success story in the industry, I would say. And sometimes it's a little bit hard to say what it relates to, but I can say it doesn't relate to a lot of marketing or advertising in the traditional sense. We do almost none of that whatsoever, and it's basically organic growth. So both our clients growing with us, and leading to increased service required as their businesses grow, which is always great to see, and then word of mouth referrals. And sometimes it feels like the growth is always kind of a new challenge, and then it just doesn't really stop. So it's a good problem to have, but as someone familiar with high growth businesses, it always is an issue, even in the best case.
It's interesting. Like, it is a good problem to have, and I think when I look at even your guys' services for my little real estate business, my mind goes to like, if I think what you guys do is so complicated, I can't imagine like a big corporation. Like, I think back to my Monarch days at how confusing it was for me sitting in on some meetings, and I'm like, you guys deal with that all day long. Circling back to kind of growth, how does EBT bring a new accountant into, I would say, their world? And because I'd imagine there's some education component to it, whether they're a student and then they become an actual CPA and then further on up. Can you kind of walk me through what that journey looks like? And from EBT standpoint, how do you recruit talent?
Hmm. Um, well, there's a few ways to go with that, I guess. I would say there's several different career paths that are involved, and sometimes people will move from one to the other, but generally speaking, they're fairly distinct. And so there's the kind of traditional CPA student, getting your CPA letters and then becoming a partner or principal. And there's also CPA technicians, which is basically the same thing, except not going down the route of getting your professional designation, but really doing a lot of the same in office prep work. And then there's administrative roles, and there's quite a few of those as well. And to be honest, some of our best employees are our administrative staff who've been there for, in some case, more than 10 years. And would be, if you were to take one staff member and pluck them out, they might be some of the hardest people to replace, and some of the hardest to kind of bring up to that level if they're new. We do get a lot of accounting students from the accounting and business stream at the Medicinet College and Lethbridge University, University of Calgary. But it kind of depends, and it comes in waves. So we'll hire like a new tranche basically of students every May and go through kind of a, almost like a boot camp process where everyone's in the boardroom for about a week or 2 weeks, and they go through a few files as a group with some instructors, and your kind of peers would be right next to you. And then gradually, as you become more familiar with the file and the work itself, we'll move you out into the kind of main areas and regular work. And so we hire like sometimes 20 new students every summer. And typically it's like 1 or 2 summers while they're in university, they'll come and work for us and kind of keep returning. And then once they graduate school, they'll return full time. So there's quite a bit of time from when you might first start working to even when you have your letters. Um, there, yeah. And then there's all kind of variations amongst that. But th- because we're a full service firm, and that's kind of one of the main, I would say, features that we have compared to a lot of the other small town firms, is if you want to specialize in US tax, tax in general, public company assurance, private company or NGO or not for profit assurance, all of those are streams that we actually need people to. Agriculture services, that we need more and more specialized people to go into. And so it's kind of like the world is your oyster once you get your designation. And so, actually, this upcoming Friday, the November 28th, is when our writers, 8 of them that we had this year, will find out whether they passed or not. So it's always a fairly anxious but also exciting day that everyone looks forward to, and yeah, and the celebration afterwards.
That's pretty cool. A couple things I want to double tap on there is you had mentioned you kind of bring those newbies, if you will, in as a cohort, as a group. Can you identify some, I would say, mostly benefits of doing a cohort as opposed to one person coming in 1 month, a couple the next month, like because I really like that principle of like it's almost as harder as easy to train a group than it is just training one on one. Can you dive into maybe the reasoning or the rationale to do it cohort based or group based when they first come in?
Well, there is a learning curve, basically, is why. And that learning curve exists kind of even if you were at another firm, often, just with learning how we do our files, whether that's the order of operations or, etiquette or things that we do with respect to clients or files that might be different from existing firms. All of that needs to basically be explained and practiced a few times before it becomes second nature. But a lot of people come in very green. And so even if you've done the accounting stream at school and done those courses, that is like, to say it's even a basic building block would be not really giving credit to how much additional learning there is to do. And so, while it's a given that people have to have a certain level of background, I would say that we assume we're going to be training people kind of from the very basic steps all the way through files. And so when you do that in a group setting, we can get some of our absolute best people to go in and teach it, whereas they might not be available to train for new people. And you're also sitting next to a bunch of peers, which just makes it less intimidating, I think, in terms of the total amount of data you have to download, and understand, and sort of seeing the questions that your peers next to you are asking. Not to mention, you can just overhear when someone might ask a question and have it explained to them. So really, it's a massive cost savings and benefit to the people in terms of how quickly they can get up to speed. And there's probably a layer of competitiveness there too, where at least I know for myself and probably for you, if you're kind of being measured more or less against some fairly direct competitors, it can lead to some positive efficiencies that come out of sort of competing.
Yeah, love that. So it's kind of a win-win from your shoes of delegating resources to educate and train, and also it's a win, in my opinion. It's kind of like baptism by fire, right? Like, because I'd imagine the schooling can only prepare someone so much until they actually get into the EBT world or any accounting world where you're actually working on files. Who in your mind, and I don't know if there's a right answer to this, but can you identify fairly early on when someone comes into maybe a cohort? Can you quickly identify which ones are going to turn out really well and which ones may struggle? Is there any correlation or skill sets that you see?
They're I would say kind of rare to get someone that gets in the door to the degree that they're actually in the cohort of the training, and wash out quickly. There definitely is a lot of kind of what would be the right word? There's a lot of observations that occur early on of, are certain people fitting in well? Are they asking good questions, smart questions? Are they not asking questions? But for the most part, people tend to be mature and responsible and professional and show up to work and kind of put the effort in to start with. So you don't want to make too harsh of a judgment early on, or even separate people early on, because honestly it can be very counterintuitive at times. The people that might not have the baseline understanding, but potentially have the work ethic or the curiosity even to really exceed in the role. But that can be not obvious when you're doing the first little bits. In addition, I won't lie, the initial, call it training or file prep or simple files you get are going to be more on the boring side, or maybe less interesting as some of the work that you'll get to after you've been exposed and sort of had your training wheels taken off. Sometimes it takes people sort of being challenged in a way, or seeing a more interesting file, or getting a better taste for what the work can be, and that'll kind of bring out the best in them too. So a lot of my job is sort of getting people in the right position, even though they might be several good spots or roles they could have in the organization. It's a lot of finding the right fit.
That's awesome. That's good. Wanted to shift gears a little bit, I guess, and talk about kind of, it's not a philosophy, but how you guys as principals go about, I would say, not dealing with the new world of being able to work from home, and being in the office. I know, your guys' building is one of the most gorgeous buildings in Medicine Hat. It's amazing. Every time I go in there, I'm like, this building is so nice. Does that, the flexibility of people working from home, is that something you guys subscribe to? Do you allow that? Can you walk through kind of how COVID, going through that whole few years, shifted from maybe 2018-19 to kind of what work looks like now for you guys?
Yeah, good question. So 2018, 2019, pre-COVID, we we're gradually starting to have more remote or work from home employees, or partial work from home, or flexible work schedules. And all of that has become, I think, very desirable from employee perspectives, kind of across the board. It wasn't necessarily something that was demanded or asked in the industry 10 years ago, let's say. The expectation would have been, 8 to 5, 9 to 4, whatever it is at your work. And we've sort of tried to balance those things between um, client outcomes, client service, and being available for them, but also keeping our staff refreshed and not burnt out and engaged, and attracting and keeping the best staff. And so sometimes there are um, mutually exclusive outcomes involved, and not one of them, not both people can be made happy. So you have to kind of navigate that. And so we went from a period of having more flexibility and open-mindedness, and if you were responsible, then you kind of got a longer leash, to then being almost entirely remote during COVID. And that was a pretty big shift, but basically that's because we had a big demand with new COVID programs and government programs, plus all the regular work, and had to keep that going. And so invested quite a bit of time and effort into making that ability to work remotely as a team, and actually found that it wasn't that conducive to the culture and to efficiency in general, to learning as well at a lot of levels where that's really important. The kind of collaboration wasn't there in general compared to what it was in person. And so the thinking has now shifted post COVID to being, I would say, management by exception. So the default now is not being able to work from home consistently, especially if you're a new role like a CPA student or a trainee or even a new technician. We definitely aren't hiring people to work from home. We might consider like a very specialized, experienced person with a lot of references, let's say, to do something like that. But in general, we're going to weigh that as a bit of a negative compared to being in office. And so basically, just a shift to being more traditional, I think, about it. And it kind of goes two ways. One is it became at times difficult to deliver the same outcomes to clients, and promptness of answers, things like that. If we aren't all working together, to wait till the other person on the file comes into the office, etc. And the other reason is people just weren't learning and progressing as much. Um, I think we saw a bit of a drop during COVID in terms of success rates in writing CPA modules and exams compared to historical.
Interesting.
And whether that's external with the way they're doing the tests and stuff, or the training, or internal, it's hard to say. But we don't think it was helping our students to be successful. And at the same time, as you pointed out, we have a really fantastic location that's central in town, in a city that has a really good standard of living and cost of living, and people can have their families and have a very rewarding day job that they still drive to traditionally, as opposed to, let's say, Calgary or Toronto, where you kind of almost have to cater to the work from home crowd in many ways. So we've built up this kind of critical mass of really amazing people in Medicine Hat, and I think a lot of our high level advantage compared to other firms is actually being able to keep that going and build on that and not water it down. Now, that being said, my role, I'm working from home today. That's a little bit of the nature of having a family, and we are also, I would say, very strong encouragers of our employees to do that. But also, as a principal, I am expected to go out of our local community and bring in business and meet clients and sort of bring our services to them. And so then by its nature, my role is to be kind of mixed in terms of in office or out of office.
Gotcha. It's a bit of a moving target, right? Because there's like this convenience that may be appealing to some high level talent to have that flexibility. But I do think, and granted, I was wrong on this. I thought when we came out of COVID, I thought the commercial real estate world was in for a trouble, like a very, very bad run. And I think it's kind of balanced back out where people like being in person. I think there's something tangible that you can feel when you're a part of a group in person, in a meeting, a part of a culture, a part of a company that you just can't get working from home. So I think
Mhm.
I think it's pretty cool what you guys are doing, how you have the resources, the building to have all those staff be in person. I wanted to kind of circle back on something that you had mentioned about retention. Say you get some high level, very, I would say, skillful accountant. Maybe they get their CPA. What's the draw for them to stay in the EBT world? And then also, where would their eyes go to for other things? Like and I know that sounds like I'm not very educated because I'm not in this world, but like, in the real estate world, for example, if you're a good agent, every brokerage wants you. Like they'll do whatever to get you. Is there some of that in the accounting world, or is that like a big no no?
Mhm. Well, I think the real estate or the brokerage world is a little bit more entrepreneurial than a lot of accounting roles. Now, I say a lot because I think the partner or principal role becomes more entrepreneurial, and people who are successful at it tend to have those skills. Whereas you could work your entire career as a very skilled tax accountant or anything, and really not have to go out and you know get business or meet new clients or grow or do anything like that. You can kind of be focused internally, and so we have a bit of a mix of maybe internal specialists or technicians and people who are more outward facing and are better in that role. And you kind of have to do both. Like you can't be a partner without having knowing the technical nature of the work itself. But a lot of people don't want to make that other transition or are not successful necessarily at driving growth. So so an organization like EBT needs both, and I think we have done a good job of basically promoting new partners who've shown themselves to have that desire and ability to kind of keep passing on the flame, as it were. And when we get up to not capacity, but to where we've all grown enough that it's kind of hard to add that incremental client, that's when you know you need to kind of add the next junior growth partner, basically, and give them some of your existing clients, which is always a tough conversation. But it's important because they need that first little bit to get them going, but they also have that hunger that older guys maybe or established guys don't have. And so keeping that um, keeping that high level of activity and focus is important, that you don't stagnate like a lot of firms do.
Gotcha, gotcha. That's
So
interesting.
sorry,
Like,
sorry to totally answer your question. Why would you stay as opposed to go somewhere else? Well, opportunities to actually become a partner
mm,
exist, whereas they don't at other firms that either um, are at capacity or don't want to change their partner level structure. Whereas we're I would say not just open, we expect that we're going to need to add one or two a year.
wow. So that was going to be my next question. How many do you add? Is there a framework there? Because I was surprised looking on your website how many principals or partners that are in EBT. I just assumed there was maybe a couple, right? And so I
Mhm.
thought I thought that was really cool because I'd imagine at least how my mind would work is maybe that's something that a CPA or someone coming in working up the ladder, if you will, that they want to chase maybe. And I think for me, anyways, that would be appealing, right?
You can get a lot of the same, base pay packages, benefits, work-life balance. A lot of those things are exist at any company would you would work for as an accountant. So you work for Suncor or the City of Medicine Hat, even, or something like that. But none of those give you the opportunity to actually buy in as an owner of that business. You essentially have a ceiling basically on your career. So the highest potential, the highest individual earning potential exists as a partner in a firm, and not all firms are equal. So, just like baseball, everyone wants to play for the Yankees. Well, why is that? I think we try and outperform in a lot of areas that make us attractive to those high performers internally.
Love that. That's really cool. I think any business, that's good advice, right? Try to outperform and kind of. I would say for those people that are driven like that to always have that next rung in the ladder that they can step on. And I think that's really cool, and I want to acknowledge you for having that framework to have those people succeed. I wanted to change things up a little bit, kind of get into some I would say generic advice from your chair to small business owners.
Mm.
You had in one of the many emails that you have to reply to me because I don't know what I'm doing. You said something that stuck with me. You said, "Don't let the tax tail wag the business dog," and I love that quote. And I've thought about that numerous times in the last few months. Can you dive into a bit for the listener what you mean by that?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, that one comes up a lot. What basically the saying "don't let the tax tail wag the business dog" is trying to get across is tax is important, but it's not the be all and end all. And it's a real expense. It's a big expense. It's maybe the biggest expense in many businesses if you have a really high margin. But if you're making all of your decisions to optimize on that basis alone, you're going to miss out on not just opportunities, but other risks, basically. And so lots of questions that might seem 100% tax based, i.e., do I buy this building? Do I sell this business? Do I Do I hire more employees? Do I outsource? A lot of these can be framed initially, at least as they arrive on my desk or my inbox, as a tax question. And very often, no level of tax analysis can actually give you the right answer. You have to understand the business. And so, should I buy this other building, or should I move the business to Lethbridge or expand? Um, yes, I can maximize your deductions and your sort of tax efficiency when you're going down that business decision pathway. But in isolation, if you're not actually growing your customers and your top line basically of your business and minimizing other real cash expenses, it doesn't really matter if I'm getting you more write-offs. All the tax losses in the world don't matter if you don't have a taxable income to offset against it, right? And so it's both. It's a balance.
I think, from my chair, whenever something comes across my desk for whether it's an acquisition or sell this or sell that, like, I don't know why my mind goes to, well, I should ask Hayden because there might be some tax implications on it. But from what you're saying is kind of like we need to continue to look at, is it a good business decision, and what kind of got us here in the first place, right? And I think that's a really good analogy back to that quote of something to be kind of at least in the front of people's minds, moving forward. I wanted to also ask you, because I get this a lot from younger agents, that maybe just come into the business and probably falls into the laps of a lot of salespeople, is the threshold of being just a sole proprietor and then becoming incorporated. I never have a good answer to figure out, is that like a revenue line for people to be like, hey, once you have this much revenue, you should become incorporated. What would you say to that? What are some general guidelines from where you would see someone from a sole proprietor to then go to incorporated? Because I know in this world too, like there's a lot of independent contractors in the oil and gas space too, right? So is there any rules of thumbs when it comes to that?
Yeah. Um, Good question. Again, a fairly common one, and also one that doesn't have a black and white answer. But a rule of thumb would be, and this is true from when they tell you in business school all the way through. The only time a corporation makes sense is if you have after basically after tax profit that you can keep in the business, meaning you're not going to keep personally. You don't need personally. If you're making after expenses, let's say $100,000, but your groceries and mortgage and personal travel and personal savings are essentially $100,000 or more, even, then there's absolutely zero benefit to incorporating, period. End of story. Even if you are going to have some excess profit for 1 year, it still might not make sense. It needs to kind of be an expectation for future years as well. So you really need to kind of get up over that critical mass of paying yourself and living off the company and saying, well, now I have more that I either want to invest in corporate assets, active business assets, buy more, um, have more employees or have a bigger building that we're operating out of or what have you, or buy a company vehicle, as opposed to taking the money out for any reason. And basically, the tax system is designed that way, where the benefit of having that, if you're paying yourself as a dividend, does not make any sense. That's all ignoring the additional costs, incremental costs of incorporating, of
Mm-hmm.
paying your accountant for a corporate year-end return every year. And if you want to minimize costs, you can always kind of do that after the fact. If you incorporate, you've paid that expense. There's no kind of unwinding that. So I tell my clients basically, you have at least one good year, be on the start of another good year, and then it might make sense. But it usually is later than people expect
Gotcha.
in most cases. Very rarely are people still dragging their feet to incorporate it. It becomes kind of like an obvious problem in some respects. Uh, Good
Gotcha.
problem to have.
Yeah, right. And it's funny, like when younger agents or people getting into the business ask me that, my question to answer their question is like, well, where do you want to be in 5 years? Because if someone just wants to, do real
Mhm.
estate on the side, then yeah, it wouldn't make sense, right? But to your point about, baking other stuff into the business, that's huge. How has the wave of AI affected the accounting industry, and where do you see that going from your chair, good or bad?
Oh, good or bad? Who are you, Friedrich Nietzsche? Um,
Right?
I would not really have an assessment of that. I would say that it's a reality that's kind of on the horizon. It's not. I would say many accountants work day to day the same as they did last year, the year before, without any AI at all. Uh, some people are starting to utilize it for composing emails, writing office policies, stuff like that, but more like compiling existing work that's kind of less value add. And I would say there's not very much AI going into like client outputs, client materials, actual decision making or analysis. So it's kind of starting to make its way in, but only on the edge as like efficiencies. It would be essentially impossible to get a major advantage today, in my opinion, using AI. Literally
Hmm.
today, there's nothing that exists that's really reliable as far as like tax analysis goes. You can type some things in, but even actually ChatGPT used to give you more answers, whether they're correct or not. And they've recently dialed that back in terms of accounting, tax, legal, medical answers for their
Yep.
own liability reasons. So we're seeing a bit of a push and pull there, even from the application developers. Um, but that being said, where are we today and where are we going? Two different things. It's a very common discussion point, I would say, and I think there's a lot of money to be made for the business that I would say t- transitions from existing GPT type AI models to something that can actually be relied on and create real efficiencies. So I can envision it, but it is not a reality today. At the same time, I do think that in 10 years, my job will look fundamentally different, and probably the organizational structure of accounting firms will look very, very different. But
Hmm.
but there's a transition that needs to happen between here and there.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same in my shoes too. Like, I'd imagine there's when someone, when you're giving advice, there's so much nuance and there's so much knowledge that needs to be known on a case by case basis that AI would never be able to give accurate advice. But I feel the same. How you said, it's kind of on the fringes, kind of on the borders. I think there's, from the business owner's shoes, there's a lot of savings that can be done, in terms of efficiencies. Or I think of, in my world,
Mhm.
for writing, ad copy or things like that to help with. But yeah, I feel the same. It's gonna be curious where things go with that. Wanted to get into kind of what your day to day looks like, and a lot of the conversations that I have with you at our year end sit down is you talking about changes to policy or changes in tax code. Where do you go? Is there like a resource that you go to get all of that information? How much reading do you do? What's kind of the ongoing basis? Because I'd imagine tax, just like in any industry, things change, and I'm just curious where you go for your information.
Hmm. Well, a couple different sources, but to your point, professional development is a fairly big area. I also have a bit more of a specialization in tax than many other practitioners might. For example, a lot of people will do solely assurance or like audit type services, where you literally could never do another day of tax work, and you'd be perfectly suitable for your role, generally speaking. I've made the decision to offer both lines of service, which means I basically have like additional professional development requirements. Um, Part of that is, I would say, like an ongoing subscription to a few different services that do a good job, either aggregating changes or giving analysis on changes, that type of thing. And so there's things like VTN, Video Tax News. They do like a monthly newsletter and a video that I would say fairly religiously watch and pay attention to. And from that, you kind of about half of it goes in one ear and out the other, and you have to hear it two or three more times. But about a half the time, it is relevant to an existing file or client or situation, and even just bringing it to your awareness that there's been a change makes it a lot easier to kind of drill into it and understand it for your situation. And so there's kind of that like background monthly PD, and then there's also bigger ones. So my associate partner Cindy, who works with me on a lot of things, she's actually in Toronto at Blue Mountain this whole week for a course. I think it's called Income Tax for the Small Practitioner, but it covers a whole variety of different things. And she'll have pages and pages and pages of notes when she gets back to basically implement these ideas. And I typically will do one retreat a year like that. One year it might be on assurance or IFRS changes, and the other one might be on tax. Um, we'll also bring in sometimes like tax law firms and do in-house presentations and discussions. Sometimes that's on like high net worth management or planning. And then we have a tax team internally. And so as a principal, I'm not on that team, but they report up to us on any budget that gets released or any other major changes as we change our templates, as we change our working papers. Uh, it's, I would say, totally like an ongoing thing that every given week I'll have some type of tax or assurance or other type of accounting professional development.
Mm, gotcha. I can I can tell by the way you talk and our exchanges that you legitimately love your business that you're in. Where did that come from? Is that something that you grew into that, or just as long as you can remember you got into it? Walk me through that, because it's rare in my opinion, anyways, to legitimately have your passion fall in line with what you do for work. Can you talk to that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, you're not wrong. I am passionate about it, and I'm really grateful and somewhat lucky to be in the position I am, where it's what I do every day. Because what I do is basically help a couple hundred of different amazing businesses and clients and people. And I think I've always had a bit of an interest in business, even from like kindergarten kind of age, but not necessarily, not even knowing what accounting or tax or assurance or any of those things are, but in general being interested in, what's this business do, what does that business do, um, the things they're doing in my community and on TV and outside. And then I went to university, not necessarily in the accounting stream, but in business and finance and investment banking. Um, Not planning to go into accounting. And I think once I actually was lucky enough to sort of get a taste of what accountants actually do, it became obvious to me that this is a fit. And being able to uh, in some ways experience what my clients are not quite, from like say a secondhand viewpoint is one of the most interesting parts of my day. So being in a position to actually offer valuable advice and insights is kind of necessary. Comes along with the territory. But I'm lucky because if I only had one business, like I don't know what I would do all day either, right? Like it is a really good fit, whether serendipitous or through my own work and drive that I ended up here.
That's cool. That's cool. Because you're right. You get to experience so many, like an array of different businesses all in one, right? I'd
Yeah,
imagine you go,
selfishly, I enjoy that.
yeah. I bet that's crazy. Um, well, Hayden, I don't want to keep you too long. I know we're already running on 40 minutes here. I wanted to just acknowledge you and thank you for all the things you do for me, and I know you do that to with all your clients too. Because at least when we sit down for the year end, you can explain things to me where I'm like, okay, I think I understand. Whereas I've been in rooms with other accountants, I have no idea what they're saying. So you have a very unique skill set where you know your business really well, but you're still able to digest that and relay it to your clients in a way that they understand. So I just want to say thanks for that. And I love what EBT is doing in the community. You guys are all over the place. The building's amazing. You're a staple in downtown. So keep on rocking it. Any closing thoughts or anything you wanted to hit on before we wind up?
I really appreciate that. That's kind of you to say. No, I mean you're a fantastic client, and I wish I had ten Ryan Wearies, frankly. You are very driven, and you're very obviously passionate about what you do. And I don't necessarily resonate with clients if they don't have the same passion or similar passion that I share. So even though we're in different streams and different kind of specialties, I think it's important that we're able to collaborate, and
Yeah.
I look forward to doing that for the future.
We got to collaborate on the golf course though. That's the thing we gotta make
Well
happen.
said.
Right. Right.
Yes,
All right,
agreed.
man. Appreciate your time. Take care. Okay?